Welcome to Gaming News and Breakdowns. Today, I'm going to be discussing probably the most talked about topic within the Arc Raiders community. Is PvP VE fun? Is PvP itself a problem in the game? And most of all, would a PvE only mode be beneficial to the game? Today, I will be discussing my view on the topic and bring up some points that I think are important to talk about. So without further ado, let's get into it. So if you're unaware of the conversations going on about PvP within the Arc Raiders community, allow me to fill you in. Over the past week since launch, this game has achieved massive player numbers on Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation. It has attracted many players from all different types of genres. Whether you're a fan of Battle Royale games, if you like to play classic arena shooters, or if you're a seasoned extraction game veteran, Arc Raiders has a little bit of something for everyone. However, because of this, not everyone always agrees on what things are fair or even justified within the game. And above all, one issue stands out above all the rest, and that being forced PvP. Now, when I say forced PvP, I don't exactly mean that you're forced to fight other players. There have been many games where I've come across a player, we've said hello, I'm friendly, don't shoot, and both of us moved on and went about our way. However, what I mean by forced PvP, it means that if a player fires on you, you can't really do anything about it except fight back. There's no way to turn that off. There's no PvE mode exclusively without PvP. And essentially, if you don't want to fight other players, you're kind of put in this awkward position where the entire game, you're pretty much hoping that you don't come across anyone hostile. Now, because of this, it has really split the community into three groups. The first group being the group that really doesn't like PvP. They are typically more casual players. They just want a relaxing time fighting the Arc, or in other words, the AI in the game. And they don't want their raids ruined by a sweat who is camping the extraction and basically gives them no hope of getting out with any of the loot that they worked hard for. The second group, most likely to be players who play other extraction games such as Tarkov, or just competitive players in general, really don't see a problem with PvP. They see nothing wrong with hunting down a player and stealing the loot that they have on them. They see this as just a mechanic in the game, a different way to play the game, and if the person who they're hunting or the person that they're fighting against can't really defend themselves or isn't really that good against other players, they don't really care. They just want the loot, and they will kill you to get it. Finally, we have our third group. Now, the third group is a little tricky. They don't really care whether PvP is in the game or not. They're gonna go in, get their loot, do their missions, and if a player comes upon them, it really just depends on what they want to do. If they feel the need to team up and go against other AIs or even hunt other players, then they'll probably ask to do that. Or if they're running low on supplies and they don't really feel the need to go and find loot and they see a quick and easy kill, they might just do that just to get whatever is on the person. Either way, they don't really care whether PvP is in the game or not, and if they end up dying to a player, they just see it as part of the game. Now, before we go on, I do want to make one thing clear, and that is that not everyone is out to get you in this game. I have mentioned before that I would team up with other players, and you'll actually see in the background gameplay me team up with two other players, and they actually were having the conversation of solo players, for the majority, being friendly in this game. For the most part, every time that I've come across a solo player, if they don't have a mic, they will do an emote that says don't shoot, or if they do have a mic, they'll say, hey, friendly, like don't fire, like we can team. Now, this typically ends in one of two ways. One, the person who is being called out to accepts them, they become a team, and typically they'll end up extracting together after they complete whatever missions they need to. The alternative part to this is one of the two players betrays each other. Either the player who said friendly, don't shoot, ends up stabbing the other player in the back, or the player who the first player was talking to says, okay, I'll team up with you, and then the same thing happens where they will end up betraying the person who asked to be a team in the first place. Unfortunately, a lot of the complaints revolving around PvP are stemming from the second of the two outcomes. A lot of casual players are logging in, planning on killing some robots, getting some loot, and extracting back to Speranza where they can craft better items and go into their next raid. That is basically the point of the game. However, a lot of casual players really don't like when other players take it upon themselves to attack them. They don't see it as fun putting 20 minutes into a raid just for some random guy to kill them at the last second and steal all of their hard work. Now, the second group mentioned in the video just sees this as another part of the game. They see the other players just like they see the robots. They're all just enemies, and the only person that they can trust is themselves. Because the game is centered around an extraction shooter style gameplay loop, it really puts the casual players at the disadvantage here. No matter what, you're always going to have players who are PvP focused and love to fight other players, even if the other players don't want to fight them back. On top of this, if the devs were to remove PvP entirely, you would lose probably a huge amount of the fan base due to one simple change. While I think that that is a complete exaggeration and would never happen due to PvP being a core component of the gameplay loop, the casual players are asking for something that isn't necessarily too outlandish to think about, which is a PvE focused game mode. Now, this could work one of two ways. One is that the only thing that would change is there's no PvP. This would mean that spawns are the same, loot is the same, everything in the game functions as normal. The only difference is that you cannot damage other players. An alternative form of this PvE game mode could look like a massive battle against the Arcs. Instead of spawning in by yourself, you spawn in with a large group of raiders, whether you're solo or not. You have a goal given to you to attack certain arcs on the map or to scavenge up certain items. Before you all can make it back to Speranza, you have to complete a list of tasks, and in order to do this, you all have to work together, whether you are a solo queue or you spawn in as a squad. This may seem a little too far out there, however, this isn't necessarily far from what's actually happening in solo servers right now. I've seen quite a few times where the entire solo server will join together in order to go against the Queen and other arcs that are on the map. While some of you may be watching this video and thinking, that actually sounds like a really cool idea, I think that that second one would be a good way to move the story along, and also it would be a cool way to have a different type of game mode that isn't necessarily the extraction shooter gameplay loop that is Arc Raiders as it is right now. However, I do see some potential issues with this game mode if it were to release, and how it could affect the game in a negative way. For starters, as I mentioned in my last video, this is my first extraction shooter and I don't have as much experience in the genre as many others. However, I am aware that the economy is a pretty big part of the game, and if in any way this PvE mode could affect it, it could potentially ruin the game for the PvP mode. If items that are rare or harder to find become easier all of a sudden through this mode, tryhard players will flock to the PvE mode just to get the good loot and then bring it over to the PvP mode where normally they wouldn't have had as many of that item. On top of this, that brings me to my second issue with this game mode, and that would be that many casual players, if not all casual players, would no longer be playing the PvP mode. While that may sound fun for some of you who are casual players, the majority of the players who like PvP in the game would ultimately be fighting sweats non-stop. There would be no other quote-unquote casual PvP players, and essentially it wouldn't last long. I think that even if a PvE mode were to drop, the PvPvE mode, which is what we have now, would still be the main part of the game. And if we see the PvE mode outshine the PvPvE mode, it could potentially spell disaster for the game as a whole. Now, some of you may be wondering, what is my take on all this? What do I think? Do I think that PvP is an issue? Does anything need to be fixed? Is there a problem with the way that the game runs now? And before I answer any of that, I wanted to talk about a different game, because when these issues started to pop up on my feed and I heard people complaining about the PvP, it all sounded very familiar and I couldn't really shake the reason why. So I went and I was searching my Xbox for old clips, and I found one that made me instantly understand it all. So I'm going to play this clip. It will be really quick, and I will give you my thoughts after it's finished. Now, what you just saw was a clip of me all the way back in 2020 stealing a player's chest in Sea of Thieves. I had hidden on his sloop and ultimately stole his hard work. And this is basically what players don't like in Arc Raiders. They don't like all of your hard work being stolen after you put a lot of time and dedication into what you're doing. However, what some people don't realize is that the art of stealing things from players is a separate part of the game. The complexity of hiding on that sloop and, waiting for the right moment to strike. I think I had stayed on that sloop sleeping, not really sleeping, but using the sleeping emote probably for about 15 minutes on that sloop. And while ultimately the reward was not worth it, as he ended up getting away with all the rest of his treasure, there is a huge community in that game that is strictly for PvP. There's even an entire faction in that game that is centered around PvP, at least to my knowledge when I used to play the game. And so Sea of Thieves, there was a point in time when people wanted a PvE game mode. That game is very quest-based. There is a ton of story and cool things for you to discover. However, it would sometimes get ruined by players who just wanted to sink other players' ships and steal their loot. And this included quest items. So if your quest item got stolen, you'd either have to find it on the vast map, since the player who stole it couldn't really do anything with it, or you would have to redo the entire quest that you just started. And in some ways, this was the charm of the game. It was a pirate game, and pirates are most known for stealing things. And in that sense, PvP was a main part of that game. And while Sea of Thieves isn't necessarily an extraction shooter, it is basically the same concept in this game, at least in my mind it is. while I'm not going out of my way to steal other players' loot like I did in that clip, I do understand why some players would want to do that, and I understand the dedication it takes to get good at the game, to find the right materials in order to make sure you have the best weapons for the gunfights, and ultimately how hard it is to plan in order to betray someone, and also just how fun it is. And so before we go on, I do want to make some clarifications as to my view on PvP. I don't think that saying friendly, don't shoot, just to go ahead and betray them and shoot them when they trust you, I don't think that's a cool thing to do. If you say that you're friendly, I think that you should honor that. However, I don't think that catching someone off guard is a bad thing to do in this game. It is a playstyle of the game, and like I said before, it is a part of the game that you have to get good at. It does require skill, and being good at PvP is just a fun part of the game itself. Ultimately, I think it boils down to this. If you're a casual player and you're willing to get better at the game, put in some time and level up, get some good weapons, I think that you'll be okay, and eventually you won't see PvP as an issue. If you're the type of casual player that doesn't like getting into gunfights and that is the main issue, maybe this just isn't the game for you. There is definitely a skill gap, and there's no shame in saying that, the game just didn't click with you. I think that, a lot of people tend to force themselves into playing whatever game is popular, and then if they're not good at it, or if they have issues with the game, they get frustrated and ultimately end up complaining about the game not having as much fun as everyone else. On the opposite side, I do understand why the PvP players do what they do. However, I also understand that sometimes they take it too far. Saying you're friendly and then betraying people, I don't think that's cool. But, surprising people and catching people off guard, it makes sense as to why you would do that. All in all, I think that PvP isn't really an issue in the game, and I fall into that kind of third group that I mentioned earlier in the video, where if the moment arises, I think PvP is a good aspect of the game. However, if things can be done peacefully, I tend to go that route too. But ultimately, I think that PvP is just a fun part of the game. It adds variety to the game, and it keeps your head on a swivel like 90% of the time. So that is my take on PvP. If you guys agree with me, let me know in the comments. And if you guys disagree with me, let me know in the comments as well. I look forward to reading all of those, as well as if you guys have any funny stories with proximity chat or anything else within the game, I would love to read it all in the comments. If you guys haven't seen my solo player review of Arc Raiders, I will leave that in the end card. And as always, I hope to see you in a future video, and I hope you have a great day. Take care, guys.